Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another CVMSDC Lunch and Learn Power Hour with our special guest today, who is the Senior Vice President of Supplier Diversity and Sustainable Sourcing with Bank of America, Ms. Vanshay Jenkins. I'm your host, VK Fields with the PR Pros team. We have a great conversation planned today as Bank of America celebrates its 30-year anniversary for supplier diversity and responsible sourcing. As a reminder, all of our audience participant lines are automatically muted. However, you can submit a question using the Q&A feature on the Zoom dashboard on your screen. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available for you to review later and share with your colleagues. You will be able to access the recording from the CVMSDC website at cvmsdc.org/webinars. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our CVMSDC President and CEO, Dominique Milton, to open up today's session and to introduce our guest. So she's going to unmute her microphone. And now, Dominique, take it away.
Thank you so much, VK. I am so excited to be here today with Vanshay Jenkins, the Senior Vice President of Supplier Diversity and Sustainable Sourcing from Bank of America. Vanshay, I had to step up my eyeglass game to be with you today. She is an eyeglass collector, and I'm so excited to be with her here today. Vanshay Jenkins is a veteran supplier diversity leader. She is responsible for leading a team that develops and delivers business strategies that lead the company's efforts in increasing opportunities for diverse businesses to participate in Bank of America's competitive sourcing and procurement processes. Before joining Global Procurement in 2018, Vanshay was a corporate real estate Southwest Region executive, and she was responsible for approximately 8 million square feet of office space, which includes the strategic and leadership oversight of third-party facility partner management. And before joining corporate real estate, she was the Director of Supplier Diversity and Development. In this role, Vanshay led a team of supplier diversity professionals and implemented key strategies that led Bank of America into the $1 billion roundtable. And what that means, folks, is that Bank of America spends $1 billion or more with minority businesses each year. That's rich. And there's only a few companies in that $1 billion roundtable, and she'll be able to share that information about that with you. Before her role in supply diversity, she led the bank's corporate food services program, which includes the management of cafes, conference centers, catering, vending, and the office beverage program for North America and Canada, which meant she oversaw seeing annual spend of $86 million and served approximately 100,000 bank employees. Jenkins joined the Bank of America back in 1997 with a bachelor's degree in business administration from Pfeiffer University. Welcome, Vanshay.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Dominique. I love being with CVMSDC.
Well, we always love having you. I was so excited when I heard you were coming back to Supplier Diversity a few years ago. Yeah. So let's start out, because you have a huge celebration going on, and we want to talk about that celebration. But before we do that, I really want to share what our mission is with our viewers, because some people just don't understand what we do, right? So we always want to make them aware. So our mission, VK? VK, you have those slides? Maybe we lost VK. So I'll just have to go without the slides. Our mission is to connect minority business owners with the supply chain. And so what we do, there you go. Thank you, VK. The mission is to expand business opportunities for minority business enterprises, we call them MBEs, and create mutually beneficial links between corporate partners and MBEs. The ultimate outcome is to add economic value to the supply chain while increasing economic opportunities in the business community. CVMSDC is one of 23 regional affiliate councils across the United States. We're affiliated with NMSDC. We are a membership organization, and we are a nonprofit corporation. Now, the way in which we accomplish our mission is through 4 pillars of work. The first pillar is certification. We are the largest certifying agency of minority businesses in the United States. VK, if you can go back to the previous slide with the 4 pillars, please. So we're the largest certifying agency in the United States. Next, we connect our businesses with corporations like Bank of America. We have matchmaking sessions. We hold 4 events per year where we can conduct our connecting activities. So we like to think that we put you in the room with the people you want to do business with. And Bank of America has always helped to sponsor our events. And this year, they are the title sponsor of one of our main events happening on December 2nd, which I'll talk to you more about at the end of this conference, but save that date, December 2nd and 3rd. We are so thankful, Vanche, that you are the sponsor of our title event this year. Thank you.
Happy to.
Next, we advocate for you because of the sheer size of our organization with over 12,000 members nationwide. We can advocate for you on a national, regional, and local level. And then we help develop you. There are developmental programs that we have created in our region. We have a Sunoco Leadership Program. We have the Tuck training program that you go to Dartmouth for, and we have the University of Richmond program. And again, Bank of America is a leading sponsor of these developmental programs, and they have some programs that they have developed, some e-learnings that you can engage in, and they are providing a grant for scholarships to any of these programs that we've mentioned, as well as other educational programs. So there's actually a grant out there that ends this Friday that we want you to apply for. If you have any questions, let us know. We can put it in the chat. But it is critical for our corporate partners, Bank of America is a corporate partner, to make sure that you are developed to the maximum so that when you are engaging with them, you are the best of the best. So with that, I'm going to jump into our conversation, VK. I just want to make sure everybody knows what we do and how we do it. So VK, we're good there. Thank you so much. So Bank of America is celebrating 30 years of your supplier diversity program. That's huge. That is huge. And you're in the $1 Billion Roundtable. So tell us about your program and the history of Bank of America's Supplier Development Program.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm really excited about this 30 years also. I think there's one other company that's surpassing us. IBM has 50 years. So I'm always picking on them. But I'm really grateful to shepherd a program that's been going strong this year. It started in 1990 with our former CEO, Hugh McCall, who pretty much said, hey, we need to be much more inclusive of diverse suppliers in our supply chain. And he committed to spending 10% at the time of our supply chain dollars with diverse businesses. But then also he appointed Dorothy B. Brothers, whose name is still synonymous with supplier diversity, to lead the work. Then in 1990, he increased the commitment to 15% of our procurement spend. And that's also when we launched our Tier 2 program. And so we were one of the first corporations to dig in and launch our Tier 2 program. When I think back, and we've been talking about the last 30 years within our corporation for a long time, going back to Dorothy Brothers and what she's done for us, I have to acknowledge the fact that she was not only an advocate inside of our company, but she helped shape quite a few other corporate supplier diversity programs. And she ensured that we were the founding members for both NMSDC and Wing Bank. And so the legacy is really, really deep there. And our program has evolved over the years. So when Mr. McCall and Dorothy had started it, we were focused, of course, on minority and women-owned businesses, but we've expanded that definition of diverse, I think, like many of your corporate partners have, to include disabled-owned businesses, LGBTQ plus businesses, veteran-owned businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So to date, we've spent about $24 billion with diverse-owned companies.
That is tremendous. That is tremendous. And then you've just made a commitment for $1 billion over 4 years. Tell us about that commitment and the programs that are going to be included in that commitment, Anshay.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about the $1 billion because I think that's the hot ticket right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that it is. But before I do that, let me back up and kind of talk a little bit about how we govern the program today,
Sure.
which then guide us into how we're looking and framing up this 1 billion and how supplier diversity will play a part in it. So we spend close to $2 billion a year with diverse businesses, and that's no small number, and it's not easy. We don't build anything. We're a services institution. We don't create widgets. So we have to be very creative. And so to do that, we have to keep our objectives really, really, really crystal clear. So we have three. One, we're always looking to increase the number of diverse businesses we do business with. Two, we want to expand the business with the diverse businesses we already have in our supply chain. Matter of fact, that has bumped up to a #1 strategy for me this year and will continue to be for the next few years. And then to your point, what you were saying earlier is provide development opportunities. And what I love about that is we get to work with organizations like yourselves to augment what development looks like for us and get development out to your members quicker and easier through you. But I think what's important to understand today is kind of our view on how we execute those three objectives. And we take a real strategic approach. And so a lot of companies, and it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I think every corporation has their own way of doing it. But I think what I've seen in the marketplace is there's a lot of focus on the next RFP, or there's a lot of focus on the next expiring contract, or a subset of categories where we see a high penetration of diverse vendors. And although that's important, we do that too. I think the last 5 to 10 years, we've recognized it's a little too tactical for us, especially in the supply chain with our depth, with our scope and depth. So here's kind of how we approach it. We take a data-driven approach. So my team looks at our complete pipeline for 18 to 24 months. We think about who is in the external marketplace versus who is in seat today. And we work with our lines of businesses who are accountable and responsible for making those vendor selections because they're taking on the vendor risk. We work with them to really drive some comprehensive inclusion strategies. In addition, we have it in our policy that every bid over a certain dollar amount, and that dollar amount's low, so I don't want anyone to think it's like $25 million, it's low, must include a diverse business. So my team is constantly scouring the marketplace, as well as working with our RPO partners to find diverse businesses. So members, stay close to your RPO. We're calling them all the time to find diverse businesses. And then my team also gets involved in nearly every strategic deal. And strategic deal for us is a deal 25 million and over. So we do close to 200 strategic deals a year. 25 million and over, to 200. Now imagine everything else. We spend 18 billion a year in a supply chain. Now it's important that the team gets involved in those deals because one, that's where the magic happens. And that's where we want to go to fight to bat at the table so that diverse businesses are included. But we also know that's where we can use our influence with our other large corporate partners who service us to increase their tier 2 spend. And we've gotten some tremendous tier 2 commitments. And we will even go as far as matchmaking from the smaller diverse vendors to our tier 1 vendors. That need a deep pipeline to service an account like us. So we get really intimate in all of that. But let's go back to the 1 billion, and I'll share.
So before you go there, Vanshay, talk a little bit about how you encourage your tier 1s to really increase that tier 2 spend.
Well, it starts with a contract commitment. So we have in our material contract terms, a contract commitment that our tier 1s must spend with diverse businesses on our behalf. We are willing to negotiate a percentage, but we start off with a baseline percentage that's very good. And we really have to negotiate that down, but there are instances depending on what the business is providing us, we'll negotiate, and they have to report to us quarterly. The other thing that we do is, hey, it's easy to negotiate down, but it's also easy to negotiate up. So going back to that data-driven approach, depending on the category, commodity, or service that our tier 1 is offering us, we can see the penetration of diverse vendors. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of diverse businesses who can fulfill this commitment. Let's be innovative here, and let's increase the commitment by X%. So we're also very competitive in that too.
Okay, good. Because what you measure is what gets results, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk about the $1 billion, because that is immense.
It's immense, and I'm really excited about it. Matter of fact, the whole company is really excited about it. And so we all know what we're going through. We're going through a health crisis and a social injustice crisis. And the toll that that's taken on our communities of color is just immense. Every day we're seeing the toll. And so our CEO said, we've got to lead the way in a commitment to communities of color. We know that that's how we do business, but if we make a strong commitment, we hope that other corporations come along by just the sheer example that we're setting. So $1 billion. So what this is aimed to do is it's going to build on the economic mobility and workforce development programs that we already have, and that supports our local markets. But this $1 billion is meant to sharpen the focus of that work. It's meant to accelerate those resources. And we had to add the particular emphasis on health services during this pandemic. I think our CEO has come out several times and said, this is a health crisis, and we've got to manage that first before the economy can come back. And so this is a net new $1 billion. So we're not digging through the company to find it. This is new, and we'll figure it out how to raise $1 billion, but we're going to get there. There's 4 areas of focus. There's health, job training, reskilling, upskilling. So think about job training, support to small businesses, and housing. Those are all also basically the core 4 pillars of economic mobility. So we have that framework that we're working within. And I'm going to be quite frank, we're doing a lot of due diligence across the company to figure out exactly how these dollars will be deployed in those 4 areas of focuses. And so, you know, when I think about it, and I think about all the brainstorm that we're doing, and remember, we have a couple of 100,000 employees who have a lot of feedback about how we do this, but I will tell you that the $1 billion will be deployed through our 90 markets. So that's how we deliver the company in the US. We have a market president who has a team around him that drives our presence in the community, and that's how we deploy a lot of our grant funding. I mean, that's how we basically deploy the company. So I would think of it like this. So when you think about health, it's make a commitment to virus testing, telemedicine, flu vaccine clinics, and other health services that in our communities, they're hard to get. So we're going to double down on that. It's partnering with historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions. And we already have deep relationships there, but I think it's being more strategic around, okay, how can we better leverage the dollars to drive some joint benefits that are sustainable and long lasting? Of course, supporting minority owned and small businesses. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. When we think about career reskilling and upskilling, it's going to pretty much be through the partnership with high schools and community colleges in our local markets. And of course, operating support and investment for affordable housings and neighborhood revitalization. And we've already committed $5 billion in community development banking to do that. And of course, we got to think about our own teammates. So we have an amazing diversity and inclusion program and strategy, but it's also further recruitment and retention of teammates in low to moderate income and disadvantaged communities. Sure, ensuring that for them, they recognize that Bank of America is a place that wants them. We're going to recruit them. We want to keep them. We want to retain them. We are an employer of choice for them.
That's awesome.
So, I don't have, I want to make one more point because I had mentioned before, we're still working through the details of deploying the capital in 4 years, but what our CEO has also said, because we ask a lot of questions, we've had a lot of listening sessions within our own company. He said a few things. One, these 4 areas of focus are equal of importance. There's no one trumping the other. But we've got to be very thoughtful about the fact that this is not a dollar for dollar impact in all of the 4 categories. If you think about it, a dollar applied to a solution in housing may, yield a better impact or a broader impact than a dollar applied to health, just because the complications of the health crisis. So really don't want people to think that, okay, it's going to be a dollar for dollar thing. It's all about impact. And although all of the areas of focus are of equal importance, there are just some that are just time sensitive. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of our work in the headlines surrounding the health crisis, just because it's time sensitive. We've got to get through it. But that doesn't mean that we're not working through everything else.
Well, the 4 pillars that you've identified, Vanshay, are very comprehensive. So you've covered all aspects of human life, right? So you're talking about the health, you're talking about your housing, you're talking about your economic empowerment, and your small business. So you've covered everything. And I love the fact that one doesn't trump the other. And I know you said you haven't developed out the programs yet, they're all in development, but talk a little bit more about the impact that you foresee for small businesses and how the $1 billion, that portion will impact small businesses.
Well, I can definitely, I think that's a great question, and I'll definitely shed some light on what we've been talking about internally.
Right.
What's the number one thing that we hear from diverse businesses, and that's access to capital.
Access to capital, right.
So we've got to figure out as a company, how do we deploy capital that is attainable for people of color? And there's a lot that you have to think through there. We have, obviously we're a financial institution and we deploy a lot of capital to small businesses. I don't have the exact number. I should have came prepared with that, but we deploy a lot. But then we also work through our CDFI partnerships to deploy a lot of capital. I think we made a commitment to provide grants to CDFIs, upwards of $100 million of grants, so that they can operate and keep their doors open. But then also we flush the system, the CDFI system, with $250 million. So I can see, that focus continuing to be even more like crystal laser like focus.
Sure.
I think we're going to really double down on education and capacity building. Like you mentioned before, I have 2 programs. One is our Small and Diverse Business Education Fund. It's been going strong since 2015. So we've deployed 3 or 4 million in that scholarship fund, close to 400 scholarships, up to $10,000 each, and the CEO of the business gets to choose the program, the accredited program that they want to go to. I've had people go to Harvard, and I'm like, can I get a scholarship?
That is how I encourage my MBs just this week. It ends tomorrow, so you've already done $1 million, and you have another $400,000 out there that they can apply for, to be able to earmark and say, I want to spend my $10,000 at Harvard or Tuck or whatever. That's rich. Yes.
They want to go whatever they need. And so we're going to continue with programs like that. I was so bummed. So we had all these great plans to get out in our markets, to get face-to-face with you all and things like that, to really get close to the diverse business community and offer face-to-face education. Because of COVID, we couldn't do that. So we quickly pivoted and we sourced over 1,000 licenses to a knowledge platform called Knowledge City. And we've deployed those licenses where businesses can have access to like 3,000 training courses that are focused on small business capacity building for over a year. So doing things like that, I think there's going to be a lot more to come. So watch out for that. But then we've also been working on strategies that I think will be amplified. So one is that I'm working with our business banking teammates, and we're thinking through how do we deepen our engagement with particularly Black-owned businesses across our communities. And we started this work back in October of 2019, and it continues. And we're piloting the work today in Jacksonville, Atlanta, Charlotte. We're going to expand into DC and New York soon, where we're really bringing the leaders of the bank in these markets together with all of our relationship capital, our corporate partnerships, our nonprofit partnerships, and grant partnerships to determine, okay, here's what we can provide to businesses in our four walls. Here's what our partners, our extension of us, can provide. How do we get all of these resources to the businesses in our community? And then from a supply chain perspective, you know, I'm really competitive. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but for me, it's okay.
You led the way, so you should, you know.
I'm just okay. So from a supply chain perspective, it's my job to really think about how do I hold the businesses who make outsourcing decisions even more accountable for inclusion. So we're going through this big analysis to determine the opportunity to increase spend across hundreds of categories that the bank spends in. And we're going to have goals for our lines of businesses.
Intentionality is key. When you're intentional and you're driving that, that's what's going to make a difference. Let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about the pivot, the twofold pivot. There's a pivot that corporations have had to make during this crisis, and there's a pivot that business owners are having to make to remain relevant for their customers. Let's talk about that.
You know, it's funny. After, I think we got off the phone earlier this week, I got something in so like I said, we're very, very data driven. And so every quarter we get this big download of emerging risks and trends for supply chains, both domestically and internationally. And we had talked about the pivot, and I was thinking about it in two ways. One is, I think businesses need to understand the watch items, the risk and the trends that corporates are thinking about so that they can apply it to their offerings. But then what small businesses need to think about so that they are ripe and ready to do business with corporations during this time. So from a corporate perspective, here's kind of where just a few things out of a long list of things that we're thinking about. So from a technology and cybersecurity perspective, obviously the trend is we're all working from home. We're all thinking about bigger and better online collaboration tools. Guess what? That means that we're all online. We're thinking about 5G security. We're also thinking about accelerating, because we're all from home and we got to work like this, tech disruption. So for your tech vendors out there, your tech businesses out there, think disruption, because that's what we're thinking about. How are consumers' habits and the business operation changing that we need to catch up to? I think about procurement, and we think about the risk. 94% of Fortune 1000 companies surveyed are experiencing at least some disruption in their supply chains. What does disruption mean? The vendors that they're doing business with stay, are having issues because of COVID. And then we see what's happening in the global marketplace. It's no longer easy to go procure outside of the US. So we're thinking about, okay, how do we now procure regionally or more domestically when 5 years ago, it was like, we are going offshore.
Right.
And the United States, all corporations are really thinking through how do we decrease our dependencies on China, for example. So if I was a business thinking about that, I'm thinking, okay, where are corporations sourcing in China that they may be bringing back those types of services, and we'll start to think about how they build a supply chain that's domestic.
So that's a key point there, Vanshay, because, you know, as a corporation, you think about your supply chain, right? But as business owners, they're not always thinking, I have a supply chain and I need to be accountable to Bank of America for my supply chain. I had a session with a business owner last week. Well, actually it was this week. The weeks are going by so fast. And I asked her, you know, how scalable are you? And she says, I'm very scalable, right? And I have 4 different manufacturers of my product in 4 different parts of the country. And I said, that is rich, because a lot of MBEs are not thinking about, okay, California gets shut down or Georgia gets shut down. How can I make sure that I continue to support my corporate client with my supply chain? So that's a different mindset that our MBEs have to pivot to be thinking, I have my own supply chain and it has to be rock solid.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And before I talk a little bit about that, because I have some thoughts on that too, I also want to provide an example of an MBE conversation that I had that I found to be interesting. The other thing that's top of mind for corporations, and I know that we've talked about it in our supplier diversity space, is ESG, environmental, social, and governance. I will tell you, given everything happening with the social justice crisis, COVID, that is the topic, number one topic of every corporation. And so I always get the question from our diverse business community, they're like, how do we play in that? Like, how do we get in that sandbox? So I was talking to a diverse business, and something about them caught my eye. And what they provide is a recruiting service for their headhunters, basically. And I'm like, we have a million headhunters. I don't need another one.
Hundreds.
I'm like, but they were highly recommended. So I talked to them. So it was interesting. Where they recruit from is nonprofits and low income neighborhoods to fit certain recs. And they have this very unique way of recruiting talent that doesn't go through the regular high-end channels for financial institutions. It played directly into my ESG.
Right.
You're going to get the people we want.
That's right.
Typical channels. And so they were able to frame it up beautifully. So I think this is to think like that. The other thing, and okay, I'm going to share this quote with you guys. So I've been reading a lot of books by this Canadian leadership guru, his name is Robin Sharma. And he said, by seizing the opportunities that disruption presents and leveraging hard times into greater success through outworking, out innovating, out thinking everyone around you, this just might be the richest time of your life so far. So going back to your point, I think it's critical that our minority businesses understand the corporation's new normal and how they can add value. I think that my example kind of fed into that. Please understand your industry challenges. I think a lot of questions that we're asking suppliers today is, okay, tell us a little bit about how you're going to stay sustainable. Going back to your point, how are you managing your supply chain? Who else, how are your customers doing? Because you could have 5 customers and 3 of them are going out of business, then you're not sustainable. So
that's right.
Framework in which you're managing your own risks. And we're all going through a risky situation, but having mitigations in plan and thinking ahead is what we're looking for in partners. And I think the other thing is innovation and pivot. I know it's not, sometimes those can be buzzwords and kind of hard to to put solid concrete actions around, but you have to today.
You have to.
We have seen threefold outreach of diverse businesses to our company. 3, 4, 5-fold, which makes sense. That is not what we didn't expect, but the reality is it's finding the innovation in a needle in a haystack when everything looks the same. So how are you going to make your product or service much more different than the other 100 vendors who are reaching out? And guess what? It's not just diverse vendors reaching out anymore. It's everybody's reaching out.
Everybody's reaching out. Everybody's reaching out. But you know what people miss, you know, when you apply for a grant, right, you have to understand the mission, the values, the goals of the organization that you're applying to. So you laid out the 4 pillars that you're focused on. You gave that great example of the staffing company, and I know you have hundreds of staffing companies. I used to be a part of a staffing company, right? So you have hundreds of them, but being able to differentiate yourself, being able to show value that aligns with your values and your goals is where and how our MBEs can pivot to do business with you. So let's switch gears to talk about how do MBEs engage? The MBE out there who has never done business with Bank of America before, what is the first step they need to take?
Well, hopefully they're certified through.
Oh, yes. Well, first talk about why is that important to you?
Because that's the number one risk mitigation to ensuring that our supply chain is diverse. Yes. We can't certify diverse spend. Right. And so that's critical to us. And that's why we champion NMSDC so much, in addition to the development that you all provide. I think the other things that businesses should really think about is beyond their offering, how do we source the category today? So when I think about contract labor, we source through an MSP. And so we are partners in crime with Pontoon. So we would probably look at those vendors together with Pontoon. When I think about real estate, we source through JLL and CBRE. So we do a joint partnership into really looking at those vendors. So it's understanding, how we source and understanding if it's kind of a one-time opportunity or an opportunity that is going to last 3 to 5 years. So when I think about technology, you may have a great technology solution and you just want to sell us the solution. Understand that. Or you may be an executioner of a technology solution and we need your services for 3 to 5 years. Those pitches are different. I will tell you that unlike other corporations, I'm not big on registration portals. I'm really not. We have not posted our RFPs for years. We have a really good handle on our pipeline because we keep our pipeline for years. But again, for anyone who's interested in doing business with us, I rely heavily on our RPOs. We actually, in addition to sponsoring our national council, we sponsor over 30 regional partners. And there's a method to our madness around that, because you can help us become laser focused on who is in the community, who's in the marketplace that can fit our needs, and it saves us time. It really does.
As an example, so if I'm an MBE trying to do business with you, don't go to the portal, or should I just register and just have myself registered there? But the most important thing is have a relationship with your advocacy group. And your manager is going to reach out and say, I need XYZ. Let's contact CVMSDC and find out who those best candidates are.
That has yielded the best benefits for the last several years, to be honest with you. It has really
good. Well, that ties directly into what I'm always preaching. You have to be at the table to eat, right? And so when the call goes out, I need to be able to say, well, pick John, pick Mary. Yes. So tell me your favorite supplier story. where you've seen success, where you helped somebody really become successful in your supply chain?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. And I have many, but how do I narrow it down? I have two. So let me share, because they're really different. I was at a conference and I walked in during the lunch the lunch event. So there's probably a couple of thousand people in the dining room. You know how we do. And then there's people on the platform, and I had just left for the airport or came from the airport, and I'm sitting way, way, way in the back. And I'm sitting at this table by myself. And I noticed that there's chocolates around the table. And it was from one of the vendors, the diverse vendors at this conference. And so I'm starving. And so I pick up a chocolate bar, and I don't eat sweets. I ate it. And I'm like, this chocolate is good. And so I took the other 9 for my purse. And so, I walked out of that dining hall, got on the phone with my procurement partners, and I said, look up this company. Their chocolate is really good. We got to figure out a home for them. And we outsource our food service to Compass Group. And so called Compass Group, and I said, I got a diverse business who we need to get in our cafes. About a month later, just making that phone call, getting our leaders all engaged, we were able to contact that vendor, ship them chocolates. The vendor's product is now in all of our executive pantries, our major cafes, such as the one in One Bryant Park and in Charlotte, Taste Cafe, etc. So that's just a testament to, I know we always talk about, does it make sense to get together? Does it make sense to go to that conference? Sometime it does. It really does. It just happened to for that vendor. The other was one of my business banking partners called me and said, Vanche, I've met a Black-owned business. They actually own a parking garage right off of the San Francisco International Airport, SFO. And I said, what? Really? I didn't know that. And so I'm from the Bay Area, and I know that airport, and it is a mess. But not only do they have a parking garage, but they have this very like awesome shuttle service that cuts down the wait time from people getting to their cars in the parking garage from SFO. So I was talking to them, and I'm like, why haven't you been on our radar? And they're like, we don't know why anyone doesn't know us. Guess what? They weren't certified. They didn't know anything about an NMSDC certification, a local, state, or government. They didn't know anything about certification and how it could help open the door for them into corporate. It puts it on the radar for corporate. So we're giving him all of this information. We were able, and we will connect him to our travel services team, because we do want to highlight him as an opportunity to spend with, as our people are traveling when we ever start traveling again. I don't know, probably 2021, but we're grounded. But those are the types of things that I think are beneficial, not only to the growth, there's the tangible contract, but then there's just the access to knowledge and understanding how this community works. So those have been 2 in the last 4 or 5 months that have come to mind.
So I love that. So for our listeners, she's gone from chocolate to brick and mortar, travel, a parking lot. So the sky is the limit, right? So this, I mean, from a drone flying over a construction site to chocolate in a vending machine to service. I mean, the sky is the limit. You cannot put yourself in a box based on your product and service. So let's open it up to Q&A. Valerie, do we have any questions from the field?
We do. We have several questions that have come in. Vanche, specifically, one is directed to you, asking if you could please repeat the quote that you shared earlier.
I'm happy to. Let me put it back up. It's one of my favorites. So, and it's by Robin Sharma, Sharma. He's out of Canada. And it is, by seizing the opportunities that disruption presents and leveraging hard times into greater success, through outworking, out innovating, out thinking everyone around you, this just might be the richest time of your life so far. We cannot let a good crisis go to waste. That's what I believe.
That's powerful.
You.
And you have people thriving through this.
Thriving.
You know, we're watching it right before our eyes. Yeah, next question, please, Valerie.
Okay. Next question is diversity involved in smaller strategic deals that are over $1 million?
Yes, absolutely. But we've gotten really, really smart about it. So we're considered what you would call a control function within our corporation. So we make sure that all of the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed when it comes to supply chain and our programs and managing risk. Supplier diversity is a business imperative and a strategic mandate of how we procure. And so, as I mentioned, we have large deals. There's 200 plus those a year, but then there's hundreds more under the $25 million threshold. So we have ensured that those smaller deals who may go through, we may not necessarily always see, that our procurement people who work the deals have all of the resources and have all of the databases and all of the rules of the road for inclusion. And I can see if there is a deal coming through that doesn't have a diverse vendor, and get involved, my team can get involved, as well as we have a center of excellence function that, depending on the deal, they may handle the deal for us, and they're also well equipped. And we get the data and the reporting that tells us where we have gaps. And so I will be honest, I mentioned the strategic deals, but my team is just as involved in the smaller deals. I know that for a lot of our diverse vendors, that's where the rubber meets the road, between $1 million and $5 million. Or if you're mid-size, $5 million to $10 million. And so we get really creative around that. And again, the other thing that I'm also acutely focused on, and why I'm focused on that population, is because if vendors compete for bids that are in that range and they don't win, we keep a close eye on them. And if we have a tier 1 vendor that we can introduce them to, we are going to extend that forward. I'm all about, we got to share in the space. You got to know what we know. And I'm always happy to do that. So it's all critical.
Excellent.
Thank you. While you were speaking, a couple more questions came in, so we'll try to get to it as many as we can. Let's see. I am launching my nonprofit foundation soon. Is this something that you or Bank of America can help with as far as a startup?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So we got to figure out a way that you can get in contact with us. So not only do we partner with a lot of nonprofits, but we help them think through how they're going to execute their nonprofit work, including strategic plans, building capital, etc. So I'm not sure if when you said help, that's what you meant, but nonprofits are in our wheelhouse also.
Thank you. Next question. Is there a diversity requirement to be included in bids and RFPs?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Also,
that is why certification is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that that requirement, we look at it both ways. It's important because there needs to be a requirement. People pay attention to what we're required to do something or what's policy. So that's part of our policy. What that also does for me, and this goes into the strategic conversations that I may have with Dominique and her counterparts, is when we have that requirement, and my team has searched high and low, our research teams have searched high and low, our procurement teams have searched high and low, and we can't find a vendor that meets our requirements to be included in the RFP. That is crucial data that we use in order to communicate with our NGO partners and say, hey, we've had these RFPs, these 1, 2, 3, we couldn't find diverse vendor. Either we need to develop vendors to go into this type of work, or we need to think long-term around, we may have very small vendors in the space and we were just too big for them. How do we grow them so that they can compete for a contract our size? But I guess the net of what I'm saying is it gives us really good data to be able to also work the other end. If we can't find them, how do we build them with our NGO partners?
Thank you. I'd
Which
like
is
to
key.
bring.
You know, a lot of people aren't thinking about building MBEs, but Bank of America is engaged in that. So through your mentor program, your mentor protege program, you know, and other programs, you help to build them.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ladies. I want to bring to the audience's attention that there is a link for the small diverse scholarships in your Q&A box. So if you did not have not checked the Q&A box, you can access that link information there. Thank you so much. And then there's one additional question. How would logistics, supply chain management, freight arrangement, global and regional, for example, fit in the Bank of America vendor pool? Logistics, supply chain management.
So when I think about logistics, supply chain management, I'm thinking how we execute our supply chain. I'm assuming, I don't know if there's any further clarification.
So there's more than that. You've got your trucking, right? And you've got your warehousing of materials so that they can deliver just in time to, you know, the bank's, you know, materials that's stored and then moving stuff around the country. Yeah.
So let me answer that question. The question centers around the fact, it goes back to what I mentioned before. We are a service industry, so we buy everything and we procure people and some technologies. But other than that, what we do is we may buy a product. For example, the paper that we use in our banking centers, we outsource someone making those forms, and then we ask them to warehouse it for us, and then we may work through an Office Depot or Staple, whoever our office supply vendor is, to be able to then move that that form around our locations, because they're also delivering our office supplies. So it becomes quite complicated depending on what we're procuring. Now, which is different than automotives. They have their own warehouses. They're the ones that's creating the car, and they need a whole logistics strategy and company to move things around. And that's just not how we're necessarily you know, made up. Another example is, like, for example, storing all of the PPE we needed. We had vendors who we may have used for specific service. We just happened to know that they had warehouses, and so we said, hey, we need to extend our business with you because you also have warehouses that we need to store our PPE. And then we used another vendor to then be able to disseminate that. So, I mean, I think that the financial services industry is a little different in that space, just because we don't create a product.
But I do know that we had a logistics vendor who took old records and helped scan records in, and that was part of logistics, right? So you got, you know, you can look about different ways in which logistics can be utilized. And then it could just be a one project situation, you know, if you're building a building. So you just never know. So to our viewers, creativity is key. And tapping in and making sure that you are at the table when opportunities arise, so that, you know, when you're called upon, you know, you're available and ready.
And hey, when you think about records, we have millions of records. We keep them in a lot of warehouses. Guess what? We source that through Iron Mountain. So it's also good to know how we source, because Iron Mountain really does need you. With all of the records that we have.
Exactly. Good example. Any others, VK?
One more question just came in. How do we identify and contact the RPO in Charlotte?
Well, that's CVMSDC.org. And you can go info@cvmsdc.org, or you can, my email is in the link. You can contact me directly or any of my team members. Okay.
Thank you. That was the last
All right.
question.
Well, thank you so much, Shay, for joining us today. So a bit of time to try and make this happen, but for our audience, it has been rich. I want to thank you for your national and regional support of NMSDC and CVMSDC. Again, thank you for being a sponsor of our title event this year. We have merged BOC, which is our Business Opportunity Conference, and our MBE Summit together because of the direction of Bank of America. You know, Egwu said, hey, you need to go virtual. And we were like, we can't go virtual, right? So we had to completely pivot in our mind to go virtual. But we are going to deliver a phenomenal virtual conference. We're going to have matchmaking. We're going to have developmental workshops. We're going to have an awards ceremony. We're going to have some fun. So we encourage everyone to visit our website on a regular basis. Again, cvmstc.org. Check out our calendar and please save the date for December 2nd and 3rd as we reemerge and plan for 2021. I want to thank you again, Vanshay, for joining us this morning. And thank you to our audience for taking time out to be here today. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe.
Take care. Bye-bye.